second visit to the Global Irish Civic Forum, and it's really great to be back here with everyone, meeting new friends, and making our connections stronger.
Yeah. So being part of a global Irish family is much like being part of any Irish family in the sense of there's always a shared connection. You don't have to spend too much time talking to anyone to find somebody you have in common. It doesn't matter where you're from or how old you are, you'll find somebody in common eventually if you keep talking. But I think there's something in that around that connection that we have and the affinity that we have for each other that really binds us in that sense, and that mission and that sense of keeping that alive. It's not something that we think will die out as there's less and less emigration from Ireland, but actually that's something that will keep our communities thriving in that, and that sense of being a global family is really, really important, and that's why it's so important to come to face to face.
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity to connect with the Department of Foreign Affairs here and thank them at one level for all the support that they give us around the world. It's also an opportunity for us to network with other Irish community organisations on a global scale. Yes, we know the organisations that are in our own part of the world, for instance, in my case in New York, for instance, but it gives us a bigger picture in terms of the Irish abroad and the diaspora and what we can do to help each other.
Our organisation in Canada, we couldn't do it without the support of the Immigrant Support Programme, and obviously the financial support is critical, but there's so much more that comes with the support that we get from the ESP. A conference like we're at this week, all the sharing of best practices across various organisations worldwide, the ESP keeping us all connected, it's a tremendous value.
Good morning, everyone. Just a flavour there of some of the thoughts and contributions that we had on day one. Welcome along to day two. Hope everyone is well rested and ready to go. Before we go on, I wanted to take just a moment because it's been so nice arriving here the last couple of mornings to the beautiful music being played. We had Eamon Walsh yesterday morning, world champion on uilleann pipes, and this morning we had Claire Walsh from Culleton playing wonderfully on the fiddle. So I just wanted to give both of them a mention. Now, I know we packed an awful lot in yesterday. Today is a little bit shorter for us all. We're going to have 2 more panel sessions this morning, and we're also going to have an open mic session. You will see on the tables in front of you, there's a sheet of paper. That's what we're going to frame that discussion around today. So you can have a look at that, have a look at some of the questions being posed, see if there's anything you kind of want to contribute and talk around that. We will have mics that will be here on the floor. We'll have people running the mics out to you. And I am conscious as well, we do have people watching live on YouTube. These sessions are being streamed there, so whether you're in Ireland, just can't get to hear, or whether you're overseas, and if you do want to contribute, there is the Slido app. Just go to the brochure, scan the QR code, you'll be able to get the Slido app and put your comments in there. So we do want to get lots of comments in, but we will get underway for this morning with panel number 4. This one is focused on our culture, Irish arts and cultural organisations as connections to the Irish diaspora and international audiences. So I'd like to welcome our moderator to the stage for this one, Síobhra Quinlan, who is the Cultural Officer at the Irish Consulate in LA, along with all the panellists for us.
My name is Kathleen McManus.
I'm Rob Shaw-Smith.
And we're with Irish Theatre. We were founded in 2013. So we've been around for, in June it'll be 10 years.
And we have, over the course of the last decade, been very fortunate to get funding from ESP. We started off in 2014 with Philadelphia, Here I Come by Brian Friel. Then we did The Playboy of the Western World. We then had funding for the 100th anniversary of Ulysses. We did a production of Ulysses. And we're doing our first show that is homegrown. We're doing a show that's the Legend of Finn McCool. And that's going to happen this summer, all with help from ESP.
And this Christmas, we're going to be presenting Atlanta's first ever canto, written by the Irish writer Carl Harper of Maryville Productions. He's consulting with us to help us make it a very homegrown Atlanta event with Irish roots.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello and good morning. Welcome back, everybody. This morning we will be discussing Irish arts and culture as connectors to the Irish diaspora and to new international audiences. We'll be exploring the work of Irish cultural organisations in engaging with local communities, the role of Irish arts in catalysing this engagement, and challenges encountered in connecting with both diaspora and new audiences, and the journey from the national to the international presentation of Irish arts. So I'm joined this morning by an esteemed panel of cultural organisations and artistic presenters. I'd like to introduce Natalie O'Shea, founder of and executive director of the Celtic Junction Arts Festival in Minnesota. Emma Smith, the artistic director and CEO of the Liverpool Irish Festival. Jim Culleton, theatre director and artistic director of Fishamble, the new play company. Liz Kelly, the director of Poetry Ireland. And William Peat, the executive director of the Canada-Ireland Foundation. So this week I've had the pleasure of being back home, and I had the pleasure of stopping by a magnificent exhibition at IMA. The exhibit was by an artist called Sarah Pearce. Her exhibition is Scene of the Myth. It comprises 12 installations spanning 20 years. And there was one particular installation that really caught my eye. I was extremely struck by this piece of work. Sarah Pearce is an artist from New York who is resident in Ireland, and part of her exhibit explores the complexity of the diaspora experience. And there was a quote on the wall by Stuart Hall, which I'd love to share with you all. The quote says, "The diaspora experience is defined not by essence or purity, but by the recognition of a necessary heterogeneity and diversity, by a conception of identity which lives with and through, not despite difference, by hybridity." And it's this hybridity that I'd like us to utilise as a diving board of sorts for us to dive into our conversation. And Natalie, the richness of your experience, and the richness of you coming to know Ireland through Irish arts, and Irish arts also being a mechanism through which you come to know your community in Minnesota. Could you fill us in on that?
Sure. I do both, I suppose. I am a hybrid. I'm only just 4th or 5th generation Irish mutt in America, and I don't mean that in a poor way. I mean it in a very creative way. I think that people in America are, some may be cultural orphans, but some of us are out there doing really deep exploration across cultures because we're made up of so many cultures. My experience coming to Irish culture really began, I suppose, with my family, and it was very simple. It was the grain beer, it was the corned beef, it was the cabbage, it was the parades, and it was very, very surface. It was very, very stereotypical, and I suppose, it's a small world. Disneyland would be about as deep as it ever got. But I met and married one of the original river dancers from the Eurovision Song Contest, and he's a dancer, he's a musician, he's a Gaelic speaker, and he and I lived here in Dublin for a period of time after we finished touring, and then left with the first pandemic. We were an extra diaspora because of the pandemic, and what we wanted to do was try to create a little cultural island in the middle of the prairies of the United States. So if you're not familiar with the geography of Minnesota, if you drew a line across the center of the continent of North America, we'd be kind of there just at the top of the states next to Canada. Sometimes we have a better affinity with Canada. And then down the center. So we're right in the middle, and there was a lovely community of some music and some dance, but what we did is, if you build it, they will come. So we have a 15,500 square foot building. We established a dance school. I'm a founding vice president for a traditional music school. We've started Cúrcal Choras. We've been doing Gaelic speaking. We established an education center so that we actually have really deep exploration and knowledge of Irish history of literature, of the language, and of all the cultural arts. And what we have, it's really been stunning because people did come. They respond in a really deep and beautiful way to the culture. And because we offer so many different options, they can come and pick what part that they relate to. And we have, I'd say, about 500 people a week taking weekly classes, really deeply exploring one of those types of arts. So this isn't a festival. They don't stop in once. They don't come by for a singular event. Of course, we've got 4 programs. We have a cultural library established with Owen McKiernan's bequest of books. He was the founder of the Irish American Cultural Institute. We have our education program I mentioned. We have our concerts and events programs where we're bringing Jim Culleton's piece over, connecting with people all across America with different performances coming in. And then our outreach. So we actually take the language to schools. And their schools, they're very multicultural. We have a very, a wide range, even though it's a Nordic state. I'd say 80% of our clients, of our audience, have no Irish connection. None. And I find that stunning. Now, we do have some expats. We have some first-generation immigrants. We have some people that, they could tell you about their past, the different families from the different counties, etc. But by and large, we are serving Irish culture and audience to people who just plain love it. And it stuns me every day. And they love it deeply, so that our students that come through, they might be Hispanic. They might actually be Russian, Latvian, Croatian. We've had a lot of Eastern European folks through. Ukrainian, we've had Eastern Indian students. And they're not coming because of affinity with an ancestry. They're coming because of an affinity with the arts. There's something deep and primal and beautiful in the music, in the dance, in the language, the filiart, the poetry, which I can't wait to hear about from Liz, that makes people connect deeply with themselves and then also to each other. And it's something that teaches me every day. Every day is stunning. And it's something that I'm really excited to share with you. I could talk ad nauseum, but I won't. Because I want to hear from these fantastic people as well and have the conversations that are coming.
Thank you, Natalie. Emma, what does this hybridity mean to you?
So I guess with Liverpool Irish Festival, so already we're looking at that kind of hybridity of it being English and Irish. But of course, Liverpool's not quite English. There's a sort of sense of it being other and othered. And so sort of picking up on those sort of hidden in plain sights sort of stories, I think, has become really important to us. But also, it's a vehicle for looking at identity, I think, thinking about hybridity that way. So Stuart Hall had that wonderful line about thinking about race and hybridity as an unfinished conversation. Mm-hmm. We're still having that conversation in Liverpool a lot. And one of the ways that we're doing that is we're looking at discrete and distinct communities. So Liverpool has a particular history with Ireland, but also with the rest of the world. So we have communities that are Irish and black. And I'm saying Irish and black because if you Google black Irish, it's about white people. So actually trying to make those distinctions and be really mindful about those heritages is really important to us. Thinking about our Irish Chinese community in Liverpool, because we have one of the oldest Chinese communities in the world outside of China, and picking that up and making specific invite into those hybrid groups to say, you're really welcome here, can we celebrate this part of you? And one of the things that we found by talking with those communities is that quite often they feel that one side of their identity is more visible than the other, and that the other side is often ignored or minimised. People don't seem to be allowed to be double identitied. They're less than half. And so we really try and make sure that we try and celebrate every part of that identity and give people agency to play with the Venn and really celebrate the stuff that happens in the middle and say, where is this juxtaposed, or where does this really flatter the other side of your identity? How can we celebrate that? So that hybridity has become really important to us, and thinking about contemporary culture and how that clashes with traditional culture, or how, because there's very little melding there that we see in the arts. There's very staid, beautiful and exceptionally skillful traditional art forms, but then they seem to be very much held in abeyance from contemporary thinking and practice. We see that more in theatre, actually, I think. There's an awful lot more of that kind of not needing to look back so much, in that it's allowed to sort of step forward and be free of an awful lot of those kind of cultural norms or tropes or whatever. But it's fascinating, and it's, arts and culture coming out of Irish people, Irish diaspora, and off the island is so well presented. It's really high quality, it's remarkably deep, it's exciting, it's dynamic, and I think that is absolutely to be celebrated and applauded and shared.
Playing with the Venn, I love that. So in my role as cultural officer of the Western US, I support contemporary Irish arts across the Western US, and it's such a treat and such a joy to connect with new audiences there and introduce them to contemporary Irish arts. And the surprise in LA when they find out, oh my God, there's hip hop coming out of Ireland, and to see that resonate with new audiences. A project that we recently engaged with and supported was Fishamble and Irish Reps Transatlantic Commissions. So Transatlantic Commissions is a project set up to address the historical marginalisation in Irish theatre. And both companies, with Fishamble based in Ireland and the Irish Rep based in New York, an ESP-funded organisation, jointly they commissioned 4 Black Irish writers. Jim, would you speak to that?
Yeah, thanks so much, Síobhra. Really interesting to be here. Thanks so much for having me, and what a great discussion already, hearing from Síobhra and Natalie and Emma. I suppose, like you were saying, Emma, in terms of the Transatlantic Commissions programme, I think theatre does have the ability to allow us think about where we've come from and what we're doing now, about what it's like to live now in the contemporary world and grapple with the issues we're grappling with, and to imagine other alternatives and other realities and possibilities for the future. And I suppose one of the great opportunities for artists and for companies like Fishamble in the last couple of decades, I think, has been the introduction of Culture Ireland over the last 18 years, and that's kind of opened up all kinds of opportunities for artists and for artists to engage with people all over the world, with the diaspora and with audiences, like Natalie was saying, sometimes Irish audiences, but sometimes people who just want to attend a night at the theatre and see what this person from Ireland has to say about their view of the world. And that's allowed Fishamble. Over the last 18 years, we've toured to 20 countries. We've had 16 productions in the last 16 years transfer off Broadway, and then I suppose the big game changer then, sort of since I think the founding of Culture Ireland for arts organisations and for artists, is the introduction of the heads of cultural affairs at the DFA. So Síobhra obviously in Los Angeles, and then Nick Quaife in New York, Kelly O'Connor in London, and the kind of opportunities that brings to kind of expand the network and to reach other communities and audiences that we possibly haven't reached before. So one of the recent examples of that was our production in 2021 of The Treaty, which was about the Anglo-Irish Treaty 100 years earlier in 1921, which, with the help of the DFA and of Kelly, and with the support of the British Irish Chamber of Commerce, and it's great to see John McGrain here today at this, we brought to the embassy in London and had the most extraordinary conversations between politicians and British politicians and Irish people and the Irish diaspora and a whole cross-section of the community, having discussions that people felt wouldn't have happened without theatre being at the centre of that or being a catalyst for that. And similarly then, the project that Síobhra mentioned, the Transatlantic Commissions Programme, kind of came out of a desire a few years ago in Fishamble when we were talking about, whose plays we produce and who has a voice on the stage and whose voices reach audiences and what voices are we missing. And we kind of thought, well, there seem to be a lot of Black Irish writers writing poetry, I think, and short stories. That was our sense of it anyway. And we thought, well, where are the plays? Apart from 1 or 2 writers, we really couldn't think of writers of colour or Black Irish playwrights writing plays. And we thought, well, is there anybody out there? Are there people interested in this even? So we put a call out for some workshops for artists, which Feli Speaks, Felicia Olasanya ran for us. And we thought, will we even be able to find 12 people to fill the places in the workshop? And we got over 70 applications for that. And we thought, okay, people are out there, we just don't know them, or they just don't think theatre is for them. So that's the job we need to do. So that was a very rewarding and successful process. And from that then, the Irish Repertory Theatre in New York saw that we were doing something similar to them. We were looking to sort of find new voices in theatre. Fishamble and the Irish Rep are both 35 years old this year. We thought, well, let's come together and commission 4 writers to write about their view of the world. So we commissioned Felly Speaks themselves, and then also Jade Jordan and Kwaku Fortune and C.N. Smith to write short plays, which we then presented as readings in the Project Art Centre, and then with the help of Síobhra and Culture Ireland, we brought to New York, to the Irish Rep, and then to Los Angeles and to San Francisco. And I suppose you'd hope that theatre, one of the things we hope in Fishamble is that theatre contributes through the art form to the national conversation and international conversations. And so it was really rewarding that we had the plays, and then we had a discussion afterwards. And for those of you who've been at poster discussions or involved in theatre, you'll know that usually maybe a quarter or a third of the interested people hang around afterwards. But everyone thought, no, the discussion is like the second half of the evening. So we did our readings, and then everyone stayed to chat about it and talk about it. And a whole range of experiences, like you were saying, Síobhra, about people being surprised that there's hip hop in Ireland. People were surprised at all sorts of things, and all sorts of, and the fact that there is a community of people who identify as Black and Irish, or mixed race and Irish, and how they view the world and what they're saying about the world. And it led to really fascinating, interesting conversations. And also, interesting that the plays were so wildly different. I think there was a kind of a sense from some people that thought, we thought we were going to see some sort of, 4 plays by 4 writers, but maybe capturing, a view of the world. But you're going, no, there's as wide a range of voices within that community as there is in any other community, which was really interesting to see. And we brought the writers. Some of the writers are also performers. They went on tour to the States with us, and then we employed actors in each city to kind of take part in the readings as well with us. And that was partly a way to make it work within the budget, but also a way to genuinely engage with the theatre community in each city. So we weren't just kind of landing in and disappearing, that we were kind of getting to know some of the actors and artists in those cities. And we were sort of thinking, when we go to Los Angeles, are there any actors of colour that could do a really good Irish accent? Because it would kind of, wouldn't work if we didn't have somebody with a good Irish accent. And I thought, I wonder if Ruth Nega is around and what she's up to at the moment. So we dropped her an email, and she immediately said she'd do it. She had Sundays off. She's filming a remake of Presumed Innocent with Jake Gyllenhaal at the moment, which is all very fancy. But she said, if I could just do it on a Sunday, I'll absolutely come along. And so it was great to have people of her stature kind of obviously brought a buzz to it as well. And people in America, they, not realising Ruth is from Limerick, were very impressed with her Irish accent, which is the least of her worries on the day. But it was a really rewarding experience, and we're looking at expanding that programme and seeing how we develop that, and with great gratitude to Síobhra and all the work at the DFA for making that kind of work happen, and just and being able to use theatre to open up new conversations and new ways of seeing the world, which I suppose is what theatre is all about, really.
Thanks so much, Jim. Yeah, and as you say, I mean, in terms of presenting Irish arts internationally, collaboration is key. And playing with the Ven, as Emma says, there are so many moving parts, and it was such a joy to be involved in transatlantic commissions and collaborating with Fishamble in that way. And for my colleagues and counterparts, cultural officers, so Nick Quaife in New York, Candace Gordon in Berlin, Kelly O'Connor in London, jointly, and speaking of hybridity actually, 3 or 4 of our roles are jointly supported by both the Department of Foreign Affairs and Culture Ireland. So together we're working jointly to expand Ireland's cultural footprint, and seeing also in terms of sustainability, if a production is touring, can it tour through several continents, and can we help flesh out those tours and meaningfully expand them and build these circuits then for future Irish artists to tread those boards as well. And Poetry Ireland provided myself and my colleagues with the first opportunity to really have what I call an Avengers Assemble moment and come together. So through the Arts Council International Residency Initiative Scheme, Poetry Ireland have created a unique residency for artists across the globe. Liz, could you speak to that project,
yes,
please?
Thank you, Síobhra, and hello everybody, it's really great to be here. And Síobhra, of course, you have been incredibly supportive, as has Nick in New York, Candice in Berlin, and Kelly in London. So we called our international residency scheme Ivad Again, which means far afield. And We designed each residency as very particular thing. So each residency is calibrated, or each residency is designed to really speak to the incredible diversity of poets and poetry which we now have in Ireland. So the poets who are heading out across the globe on our behalf are early career poets and come from a range of backgrounds, and they really do reflect the Ireland in which we now live, and we were keen to put that out there into the world. So one of the poets has actually finished her residency. She went to Edinburgh, Liz Houghton went to Edinburgh and worked with the Scottish Poetry Library. We were particularly keen for her to connect with a primary school in Edinburgh, because we run a huge national programme called Writers in Schools, and through Writers in Schools we run out we run visits to schools by writers in about 400 locations around Ireland, north and south. So Liz was developing her skills as a writer in schools, and managed to work in this Royal Mile Primary School in Edinburgh, which has the most diverse population of students in the entire city. So we matched, or we paired that school then with St Mary's on Dorset Street, which again is a very diverse school. So the whole point of it is that we enrich the poets' experience, we broaden their network, we connect them with others, and we actually enhance their own experience as well. So the residency is all about developing that network, making those connections. Liz managed to record a podcast with Kathleen Jamie, who's the current Scottish Macar, just before she came home. So that residency is just finished, but it means that she has that connection on an ongoing basis now with that community in Edinburgh, and they with her, and she's going to come on to our Writers in Schools programme and work as a writer in schools here for us. The residency in Manchester has also commenced. Molly Toomey is working with this fantastic company called Quarantine in Manchester. And again, a lot of our work is around not just the poet on the page, or the poet delivering in a kind of a very formal literary sense, but also exploring ways in which the poet can work with other artists. So in this case, Molly has been working with a digital artist and a community artist, and they're observing people as they go about their business in Manchester, and live writing. So it's a live writing project with projections, and it'll be web-based. So the digital world, the poet and the contemporary artist, all there kind of meshing together. And Molly will go back again in June, revisit that experience, and we hope to run an iteration of the project in Galway, possibly later on in the year. Again, that whole kind of broadening of experience, the networking, the opportunity to do things in a different way, to push the boundaries of what people understand by poetry. James Conor Patterson then is going to Berlin in June as part of the Poesy Festival. There's a brilliant organisation in Berlin called House for Poesy, which is similar to us in Poetry Ireland in the sense that they're a resource organisation for poets. So it's about the education of the poet, the connecting of the poet with public. And he would be part of a huge international festival which they run in June. He'll run some workshops, he'll have his work translated into German, he'll have an opportunity to work in the office at House for Poesy, again broadening his own experience and having his work translated into German, thereby opening a whole new audience for the work of an early career poet. It's hugely valuable. Then in the United States, Neethi Casa will visit New York later on in the year, working with an organisation called Cave Canem. And Cave Canem was established to address the issues of underrepresentation of African American poets in the literary scene in the United States. They've been hugely successful around their work, around that objective. So Neethi is going to work with them, and she'll also have access to the Fishamble collection, and to the New York Public Library system, and hopefully a performance as well at the Irish Arts Centre, which we all love in New York. It's such a fantastic resource for all of us there. And then finally, Roisin Kelly is going to a place called Tippet Rise in Montana, which, and Roisin herself would say that she loves remoteness. She lives in Leitrim, so she's going to Montana, and Tippet Rise is about as remote as it gets. It's a 20,000 acre farm with artist residencies in really, really deep rural Montana near Bozeman. So she's going to have some time there, but she'll be working with some Indigenous communities there and also giving a lecture at Bozeman at the university and just generally connecting, doing some readings, having some time out there, and then by complete contrast going to San Francisco to read at Litwick at the other end of her residency. So that's the 5 that we'll be rolling out over the year. They're short, they're about 3 to 4 weeks per residency, but again it's about the networking, the connecting, the developing audience, and also from the point of view of Poetry Ireland as well, connecting us with those organisations. And I would say that we've been pushing an open door because of the phenomenal reputation of Irish poets and poetry. You know, it isn't hard for us to actually make connections. You pick up the phone and you say that you're calling from Poetry Ireland anywhere in the world, and people go, oh yes. There's an immediate recognition. And that has really been supported and helped by Culture Ireland and by people like yourself, Síobhra, on the ground, always looking for opportunities to put Irish poetry out there and into the world. So we're learning from these residencies, and we hope to roll them out again in 24 and 25. So it's been a really exciting year for us.
Thanks so much, Liz.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a fascinating learning curve for me over the past year, witnessing the multiplicity of ways in which Irish arts can present themselves within the Western US and connect with diaspora and new audiences, be that through partnering with local organisations, working with leading Irish cultural organisations, or touring ephemerally. And I suppose I'm fascinated by this journey of, you know, before there's a bricks and mortar building, the ways in which one can engage with community and establish a cultural identity. And William, with the Canada Ireland Foundation working towards the establishment of a bricks and mortar building, could you fill us in on how you guys are navigating this process and establishing yourselves there and engaging meaningfully with communities?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you to the DFA for putting this on. I don't know how I'll go back on Monday without being serenaded by Irish musicians every morning. But it's a great question, and I think it comes very similar to what a lot of people have spoken today, is that kind of multifaceted engagement and trying to connect. I kind of, in a way, joke to Rob, the Monty Python-esque, what have the Romans ever done for us? It's kind of, what have the Irish ever done, or what can they do? I think what Jim said is exactly right. Jim's tool is theatre, so he sits in Dublin and he looks at what's going on around me and how can theatre engage with that. For Canada Ireland Foundation, that's Irish identity, or the island of Ireland. So the kind of trick is in the name to a certain degree. We're the Canada Ireland Foundation. I'm Irish. I spent my career and my academic life before that studying the Irish diaspora and working in it. But Canada Ireland Foundation is a Canadian organisation. We're based there. We were founded there. And so we work every day to engage with a Canadian audience, specifically mostly a Toronto audience. We have illusions of grandeur to be all Canada, but not quite there yet. And so when we put on, we're also bringing over Fishamble and Humour's Abandoned. When that's on that night, our competition is not the Peacock, it is not the Gate Theatre, it's not the Abbey, it is Soul Pepper in Toronto, it is the Canadian stage. So we're trying to attract and entice Canadians and Torontonians in, and how does Irish identity or Irish culture affect them, and what lessons can they learn from that. And so that kind of takes us all over the map in terms of we do history and heritage. We have an academic on contract who works on creating exhibits, learning about the Irish in Canada, which I could talk for days on. That's a fascinating endeavour. And the Canadian ambassador, the Irish ambassador to Canada is here. He's doing 50 Irish Lives, which looks at Irish people and the huge effect they've had on Canada. So we present that in a variety of different ways. We then do the contemporary art series, so theatre. Toronto is a music town, so a lot of music for that as well. And then we're looking at a plan to do lifelong education as well, which I spoke a little bit about yesterday at my point. And so through that and curating that with a strong sense of, we're not trying to be all Ireland, or we're not trying to be every version of Irish identity. We curate what we want to talk about, how we want to talk about it, and we curate it for a Toronto audience. So specifically, as I was saying to Natalie earlier, Toronto, 52% were born in a separate country, 54% are visible minorities. It's a very liberal country. Canada in general, it was a hegemonically kind of white culture until end of World War II, and then rapidly became multicultural, which Dublin has done the exact same in the last 20 years. So these are fascinating conversations to be had. And then we kind of look at three cohorts. So we look at our community, which is Irish people and Irish Canadians, and they, directly want to engage with their Irish culture. We then have a Toronto audience who Irish culture itself is good enough, as Natalie is saying, that anyone with any kind of interest in theatre or music will come to an Irish artist and be blown away by their skill and what they're doing. And then finally, we want to try and kind of curate that conversation. So Ireland has lessons, or has learned lessons that it can bring to Canada. We're talking with Manachán McGann again. He's been doing amazing work with Indigenous people across North America and the Aboriginals in Australia, and that has massive resonance to be able to bring Irish culture and what Irish language can kind of have an equal conversation with the Indigenous First Nations. Toronto or Takaronto, which is the traditional name where we operate. We're on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit River, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Cree Nations, and so there's all of these. Toronto itself specifically was kind of, it means the bowl with one spoon, which everyone would come to and gather together. So there's this 15,000 years of Indigenous history there. That's incredibly important to the city, to the citizens of that city. And so we can bring over an Irish artist and begin to engage with them on that. And that's really special when Irish culture is kind of toe-to-toe and helping to work on that. On the kind of darker side, Canada does have reconciliation going on. It does have the residential schools, which was a very dark period in Canadian history, but very similar to the laundries and what was going on here. And so there's lessons, and there's artists have been reflecting that and refracting that, so bringing those back. And so, we've had to work nomadically around the city, but I think, we're kind of in many ways a branding house. We work very hard on polishing what we do, our brand and our image, and so people have a very strong identity of who we are and what we're about. And then again, you get into the arts, you think you're going to listen to great Irish music the whole time, but instead it's spreadsheets and analytics. So we spend a lot of time looking at, where our audiences are, where the hit rates are, if we put it on this media versus that media. And so we just spend a lot of time. So ultimately, I've now become a Toronto arts organisation that specialises in Ireland, and so we spend our whole time kind of looking at that, and then hopefully September next year we'll have our building, which will be a space where we can continually bring people and expand our programming. We have 365 days, God forbid, because we don't do anything near that at the moment, but eventually we'll get it to a point where we have education throughout the week, and then leaning into the arts into the weekend, big exhibits because again, Toronto, it's crap in the wintertime, so something that you can go in and be warm and spend a bit of time on would work well. And so try to curate all of them and just bring them around. And then finally, working nomadically, the great kind of advantage of that is we've created fantastic partnerships. I was talking to Liz. We have great partnerships with the Toronto International Festival of Authors because of that, with TIFF, with the Art Gallery of Ontario, with the Royal Ontario Museum. So because we've had to go and work everywhere, we've developed partnerships with all of these people. And so again, we can then work with the city. So I get talking to Natalie, our space will fit 140 people standing, 120 people sitting, so a little bit smaller than yours. But because we now have partnerships, if we're bringing artists over who can go to a bigger location, we know who to talk to. We're the kind of experts on the ground for that as well. So so ultimately what we try to do is think about it for, what do the Canadians need? What are they interested in having a look at? And how can Ireland or Irish identity kind of pinpoint that? Sometimes it's history and heritage. Sometimes it's contemporary art. Sometimes it's a gathering with a pint of Guinness and a chat and a network and, a talk from a business leader. It's a bit of everything, but it's always with that lens of, what can the Irish do for us?
Thanks so much, William. A question to pose to the group. I'm intrigued to learn of what learnings have been imparted to you from the communities that you engage with?
Well, I'd actually love to follow up with what William was saying. Knowing your audience is a huge part of it, and I've already explained. There's not a huge amount of Irish immigration right into where we are in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, but what people are identifying with is what we're following. We're really listening, and that's part of that challenge. Is that we can talk. The danger, of course, of talking heads is that you don't take that information back. One of the people in the prosperity panel said it really is about the listening. We're trying to listen to what our audiences want and what they're seeking. With our multicultural audience, we too have done some partnerships, particularly with our Indigenous community. Our area is indigenously both Dakota and Anishinaabe. We've been working with an Ojibwe tribe, and one of the really neat things that they've taught us, we did an exchange that had bits of dance. We did an exchange that included music, because of course the rhythmic backgrounds, I mean, that's so primal, you can take that just about anywhere. But then also the language piece, and we really went deep into the language as we're doing exploration within our Minnesota community to restore native names to some of the locations, which we use then the conversation about using Irish language names of Irish places. What does it mean? Monica, you know, he's so infectious because he came over and he did this whole thing, and we had a long conversation after his show about how much we've learned from our community about how we can reach out in partnership with these other these other cultural groups and what they are teaching us in return. And there's been a great response to that. We did an exchange with a Bollywood group, which was amazing. We have had, of course, different involvement with Brazilian music, the San Patricios. We did a lovely exchange called Comer with a North African group that we sponsored. And the response from our audiences is phenomenal. They want to see, as they explore who they are with their own culture, whatever that may be, and it might be multiple parts of themselves, because we're all hybrid, most of us in America, and we're all immigrants unless we're native. So that by touching base from the viewpoint and from that beautiful ocular kind of vision of our roots, who we are as humans, how we identify with our culture, our language, our music, our dance, which of course belies then our belief systems, how we connect with each other, what we're looking for as we seek who we are in the rest of the world. Making the partnerships is the response to the bigger part of culture. And that way we're making new conversations, we're making new connections, we're making new music, and we're making new dance. And it's absolutely, that's part of what teaches me all the time. It's like exploration every day, and it's never dull, and it's really exciting. I can't wait to hear about more of what you guys are doing as well.
I think it's exactly that. For us as well. Every time you work with people, you engage with audiences, you work with artists, you kind of work with collaborators internationally. You're learning something, and you're finding out more. You know, we're doing a project at the moment with companies in Scotland and Wales, with Barrack House in Wales and Theatre Galore in Scotland. It's a trilingual project which is also being supported by the British Irish Chamber of Commerce, and it's working in Scottish and in Welsh and in Irish. And even the conversations we're having are just opening up all sorts of new dilemmas to me. You know, we're thinking like in Ireland and Scotland we'd have English surtitles for people that don't speak those languages, whereas in Wales they're going, no, we won't be having any English surtitles. We might do Welsh surtitles for the Scottish and Irish bits, but we're not doing, we're not having English surtitles. People will understand Welsh, like all kinds of levels of ways of working. And we've worked like internationally with musicians and with dancers, and we kind of think, oh well, a play rehearsals for 4 weeks. The dancers think, oh no, we need 7 or 8 weeks because we need to spend 2 hours, exercising and warming up and doing yoga in the morning. We're kind of going, oh yeah, we don't really do much yoga in the morning and plays. The musicians are looking at us going, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, are you out of your mind? I just thought I'd turn up on the day and be given the music and maybe have an hour or two to try it out. Like you learn things kind of by collaborating all the time. I think the thing we learn most, I think, is that people sometimes say plays that are very specific to Ireland and seem very local. Like, how do people in Los Angeles or Sydney understand all that? And I think the thing you find is that there's the more truthful something is and the more honest something is from an artist, then the more it connects with people, and that we all are, we're all so connected, and that people, so we had a glossary. We had a show called Heaven in New York recently, and it's going to the Travers in Edinburgh for the festival, and we had a little glossary of terms because people didn't understand that, on my Todd meant on my own, and, up the duff meant pregnant. And then people said, oh, remember because of the footballer Damien Duff, the people you say, oh, I'm up the Damien, we're going, oh, that's getting way too complicated. We're just trying to explain up the duff. But people were saying, even though I didn't have a clue what up the duff meant, my God, I connected with a couple in trouble with a marriage in crisis, and I rooted for them, and I really, so there's something about the more authentic something is, then no matter where you go in the world, people that might have no connection to Ireland, might, you know, barely know Ireland, kind of connect with that emotionally. And then I suppose that brings about, it's a way of connecting people to Ireland. I mean, people kind of get to, you just realise going around the world as well on tour and having the privilege of that people kind of say, you know, that have no connection really to Ireland will say, oh, I love James Joyce, or, you know, I went to Irish dancing classes, you know, from when I was a child, even though there's no Irish connection, you know, like you were saying in a way, Natalie, with that, you know, and that's very reassuring that we're all so connected, and more than we sometimes think we are, you know.
Yeah. Very much echoing that. I mean, we have found that as well with these international residencies, that as I said, we are pushing an open door, but you immediately have that, even a professional network. You can pick up the phone to anybody, and the conversations are hugely enriching. You know, you're learning all of the time. Every conversation you have with somebody in Berlin or in Manchester or anywhere, you know, in the world, in terms of that kind of diaspora, that network of literature and cultural organisations, you're always learning something. And certainly the universality of the language is something that's really coming through very clearly. I mean, certainly for contemporary, for that, you know, early career poet, that younger generation coming through, the themes that we see emerging in Germany or in the Netherlands, those are very much echoed by what we're seeing coming through from that new generation of Irish poets. So those concerns are universal. I mean, James Conor Patterson will be going to Berlin. Their entire theme this year centres on the fact that, of course, on Europe's eastern flank there's a war raging and there's the refugee crisis, etc. So their entire theme centres on the political difficulties currently existing all around Europe. And they're unafraid of that. So there is something very, very interesting and very universal happening around the way people are expressing themselves, and the way we're learning from that is hugely enriching for us as well. I mean, in imagination, you know, we develop compassion and empathy. There's no question about that, and that is very clear from the work that we do. You know, that we do learn an enormous amount from that connection with others.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Famous writer, Scouser, theatre maker, Willie Russell said, if you can tell one story really, really well, actually you tell lots of stories pretty well. And I think Irish arts do that in abundance. And certainly what we're seeing in our communities is they're thirsty for those stories, and they're thirsty for things that they can look into to help them self-identify more. I think there's an awful lot of questioning happening around that. Liverpool particularly, I think, is going, I mean, I recognise that globally this is happening. There is a kind of unpicking of the colonialism that has led to the way that Liverpool is built. But in doing that, looking at the Irish influence on the character of the city, on the fabric of the city, you know, Liverpool's a sandstone city. Didn't think I'd be saying that today, but it is. And the curbstones of all of the docks that were hand-built by an awful lot of the Irish are made of Irish granite. And people need to know that, and they see themselves in that. And when they hear those things and can connect with that, and they can touch Ireland in Liverpool, they're deeply connected by that, and we're learning that all the time. Also, they're remarkably clever. Like, really clever, taking on very big concepts, very deep things, and a lot of information. And I think there is a tendency in some sectors to maybe dumb things down, and we found we just can't. You can't get away with that with our communities. They're brilliantly inquisitive. And as a festival, we really struggle, actually, because we've got 10 days a year in October to sort of make our mark. And there are brilliant services in Liverpool all year round with Irish Community Care and with the Liverpool Irish Centre. So working in partnership with them and keeping ourselves relevant via them is really important. So, you know, we work with about 80 partners every year, even though we're only a 10-day festival. So that partnership is incredibly important, and communities see that. So we are the mirror of that community. They're all networked. They're all using all of these different venues, all of those partners, and seeing us working with them actually is a reflection of them, I think. So that's something our communities have taught us, that we are better together. We need that network.
Yeah, I think the two quick lessons I've learned, number one, it's a bit granular to Canada, but Toronto, for example, is known as the Belfast of North America. Massive Northern Irish population. Traditionally, it's been a Northern Irish Protestant population moving to Canada, which you instantly then learn, don't dare be overwhelming in what you would think Irish identity is, and don't do a top-down understanding of it. Irish identity is so multifaceted for so many people. And again, nowadays as well, Irish identity is, I was at the Dublin Fringe, and it's a woman born in Nigeria who moved over here as a child, is naturalised Irish, grew up in Tala, knows nothing else but living there. So her Irish identity is fantastic and multicultural and something to be celebrated and shared, and that's Irish culture now. So I learned that quickly going to Toronto, which is don't try to be kind of top down with these things. Allow all versions of Irish identity or Irishness to be brought out and celebrated. And then again with the Indigenous side of things, moving to Canada, I thought Ireland was part of the British Imperial Project. We were kind of, during the famine, we were victims of that as well. And then going over to Canada, you learn very quickly that they understand that by dint of moving to Canada, they became, in many ways unwittingly, but perpetrators of that imperialist settlement of Canada. So they took land off the Indigenous people, and they felt that. So they kind of, our community informed us to be very clear about that and to understand it and to engage with it. And so I've had to learn as an Irish person what the Canadian Irish are interested in. And so, listening to them and their version of Irish identity and their version of the world is so important. And I've learned so much from that. And, that obviously helps inform the programming. But it's been a great privilege as someone who grew up in Dublin to move to another country and see an entire history of Ireland that I was unaware of, and that kind of fascinating interconnection. And, the Canadian government, a lot of it is formed by Irish people moving to Canada and being like, okay, we're messing up with what's going on between Catholics and Protestants. There's a lot of issues around that. So coming to Canada, we're going to ensure that doesn't happen. And so a lot of the Canadian government is based off of parity of the French and the English, so the kind of Catholic French-speaking minorities and the English majority. And so the Canadian government is designed to be 50-50, even though they're a smaller version of the population. And that was to allow that equilibrium and allow both sides of the culture to come together. So to learn all about that and learn about that history of Irish people in a foreign country really helping develop it and really helping look and reflect their own idea has been a massive personal privilege, but also really helps inform our programming.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much, all.
If I could follow up with that, I think that, what William's saying about it's informing us. There's a danger here as we sit, sometimes talking about things and, looking at the program, and it's got the nice diagrams, and it looks like silos of ideas. We've got the people, the values, the prosperity, the culture, and then the influence. Did I get them all? I think I did. But what that is, that's kind of a patriarchal structure, put into this framework. And I'm sorry it is. And what we're learning by engaging with culture and from our deepest selves of our sense of our authentic identity as we discover what that is internally. And then we take that out to others, that we've learned from our Indigenous groups that they don't ever put a stage and a line and people talking at other people. Mm-hmm. They bring the people kind of to set the ceremony into the center. They give thanks to each other and to the moment to be here. And it's always done circularly, always. Always, and that's informed us in such a way. So I think what the arts do, and what I'm hearing from each one of you in your own special ways, is it helps us decolonialize our minds. Mm-hmm. The arts do. Mm-hmm. It helps get us out of our heads. And if you think, the poetry, it comes out of our mouth and our throats. And it's so beautiful. And the music comes out of our throats and our hands. And the games, I promised I'd mention the God. It comes out of our bodies. Our bodies engage with that. The dance comes out of our feet. What the arts do, what culture does, is it helps us inhabit ourselves. And helps us know ourselves. And only until we know ourselves can we know others. And so what it does is it takes the great pillars, all those silos of information that we've so carefully put into these boxes, and actually turns them in on themselves. And it creates this incredible web and connectivity that you cannot explain away. You can't put a network like top down on it. And I think that's exactly it. And who was saying that? That it can't be the top down. William, that was you, right? What the arts do is it brings us into ourselves, into our hearts and into our souls, and that's how people connect. And that's why this works. It's such a valuable part of the Irish power across the world. And I think you guys absolutely don't underestimate it. And that's where I'm at. You know, there's so much power around it.
Natalie, thank you so much. And as we pivot from the linear to the circular, we'd like to open the discussion to the floor. Do we have any questions to pose to the panel? So could we dim the lights a tiny bit? Or bring up the house lights? Oh, here we go. There's a lady over here.
Hi, Ted Smith, represent Luxman Ireland House in NYU, and I can only speak to the Irish-American experience, but this is a great panel. Siobhra, thank you for chairing it. I've learned so much, confirming that, I guess, if they say all politics is local, all culture is local and global, because you take the global Irish and then you transition it into local identity and roll with that. And we've got to validate that, and you are all validating that in your individual cities and regions. It's a much more complex thing. It can't be really put in a box. You have to run with it as, you know, as best you can. But it would be good to have a template out of what you are all talking about today, so it could be shared with Irish organizations. Particularly, you know, we have 6 cultural officers in the United States now, which is really a great step forward.
6 across the globe. So we have 2 in the United States, 1 in the United Kingdom, 1 in Germany, 1 now in Sao Paulo looking after Latin America, and 1 in Beijing looking after China.
Wow.
And our family is growing.
Between you and Nick in the United States, it seemed like you were 6. So, well done.
Thank you, Ted.
But, you know, we did this survey, back to the old boring topic I talk about, which is market research. We did this survey on Irish America, and if you want to hear more about it, we'll be doing a webinar next Wednesday. Just go on Luxman Ireland House website. The survey is there, but we'll talk more about it with the pollsters. But, you know, one question is, are you a member of any of the following groups? Select all that apply. And the usual groups, and 72% were not members. And the most that were 15% were on online Irish groups, which talks to a bit about the COVID effect and trying to do hybrid meetings and so forth. But have you attended any of the following Irish-themed events? Select all that apply. 54% music concerts, I guess no surprise, from Bing to Bono. 46% theatrical or dance performances, 20% art exhibits, 16% lectures, 11% book readings, and 30% none of the above. Now that's just amongst many different answers, but it gives us some idea, and if you do your research at local level, even better, because it obviously differs a great deal between Massachusetts and Georgia in the United States. And we have, you know, maybe we go where the audience is, but we'd like to keep the rest of it going as well. And what Síobhra is doing in Los Angeles with Screen Ireland is absolutely fantastic as a way of reaching out. The green wave is having such an impact. So, you know, let's roll with whatever we can. But one final thought is, the challenge for us in Luxman Ireland House is, do we go back to in-person meetings or do we go back to hybrid? If we do an online streaming, we find some people just stay at home in their house in Connecticut or New Jersey or Brooklyn and watch it and don't come in and participate in that wonderful interpersonal connection we have afterwards when we have a cup of tea or a glass of wine. So what we're doing is, and I'm sure many of you are doing the same thing, we're recording it and then putting it out on our YouTube connection so that people can watch it later. Now, who's going to sit down for an hour and a half or an hour and watch something on YouTube? Maybe not a lot of people, but at least it's archived there if people want to watch it in their own leisure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ted. Thank you. I think we have a question here.
Hi, Michelle Sullivan. I'm Vice President of the Ireland-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and Thank you very much to the panel. There's one thing that really resonated with me, and I think it's a challenge that a few of you laid down that I think that the rest of us should be listening to and picking up, which is the piece about decolonization and working with our Indigenous nations. So in Canada, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, but also looking at how we structure our organizations, the way that we run meetings, and thinking about how we can decolonize. So thank you very much for raising those points. I think that they're very important. We've had the benefit today of hearing from a representative of the traveler community. These are people that we should be engaging with here and in our communities. As the Chamber of Commerce, we should be sitting down with our First Nations representatives as well and learning from them. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I think we have another question here.
There's some more on this side.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It's Pauline from the Traveller Movement, and just really building on the previous comments, thank you for those. Great panel and brilliant input. And really that focus on the Indigenous people is so impressive and feels really deep and meaningful. I have a question, which is, as Irish travellers, as the Indigenous nomadic people of Ireland, how are you recognising them, or are you proposing to share the learning from the Indigenous people you're working with across the Americas back into Ireland, into our own people? Is that work that you've done in the past? Is that work that you're doing now, or is it work that you might propose to do in the future? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Yeah, it's certainly work that we intend to expand on. And as William touched on, Mancán Magán's project, Arán agus Im, of course the Irish for bread and butter, champions the Irish language and brings it into the fold, in an international context, and is sort of a vehicle through which Mancán can then engage with other Indigenous folks and set up this dialogue between Ireland and international communities. And actually, if Callie Shine or Maura O'Keefe are in the room, I'd love to hear them speak to the expanding of this project. Callie, are you here?
Yep, that's Callie.
Down the very back. Or hang on for the mic. I can't hear you up here.
Save it all up for the mic.
Yeah.
Hi there. Thanks, Síobhra. I'm Callie Shine. I'm one of the associate producers at Once Off Productions that produces Mancán Magán's Arán agus Im. I'm also the associate producer at Fishamble, the new play company. So very excited to be here. It's a really interesting question from Pauline from the Traveller Nation, and definitely something that Mancán and that project specifically is interested in expanding and exploring Irish Indigenous culture, and where where the intersections of Irish Indigenous culture lie with First Nations people and Native American cultures and the Aboriginal people in Australia. We are really excited to hopefully later this year send Mancán Magán back to North America to spend a bit more time both performing Arán agus Im for communities across the West Coast, and spend some kind of deep-rooted time engaging with communities there and artists, makers, poets, writers who come from those communities. But it's a really interesting question that Mancán explores the Irish language, and he's not a traveller. He's not exploring the Indigenous traveller community, and I think it would be really exciting to see traveller art and traveller culture explored in that similar way.
Yeah, great. And just following on from what Callie's saying, Callie's obviously our fantastic producer producing Humans Abandoned with us in Fishamble, and also produced Arán agus Im. And I think it's something like, it's kind of feeds back for us in Fishamble. Certainly it's about whose voice is on stage and the range of voices explored. I mean, we've worked a lot with Rosaleen McDonagh, who people might know as a really fantastic playwright who is a traveller. We've brought her work to the Kennedy Centre in DC. We produced a play by her in the Royal Hospital Culleton on the first anniversary of to celebrate traveller ethnicity. And she's kind of really kind of through theatre, certainly kind of, I suppose, our prime example of somebody from the traveller community kind of bringing a voice to the stage. And the conversations with her are fascinating, just about the frustration of decades of non-travellers, representing travellers on stage. We're starting to see some fantastic, we've worked with John Connors as well on writing and developing his play on a scheme called Show in a Bag that we run with the Dublin Fringe and the Irish Theatre Institute, which is where Humours Abandoned came from, kind of helping performers create their own work. So I think we're starting to see the voices of the traveller community kind of flourish and grow, even though it's been I suppose a slow process.
Thanks. And we actually deliberately work with traveller community as well. We have been running poetry workshops with traveller poets, and we've created a number of opportunities for performance and readings by traveller poets as well. And we work with there's a traveller school in Bray, a primary school, which we work with on an ongoing basis. So within our own diversity and inclusion strategy, we have a very deliberate policy in relation to working with traveller communities and including traveller poets in everything that we do. So it's something that we're very, very serious and conscious of.
Thanks so much, Liz. Yeah, and as we were speaking earlier to these frameworks and these circuits that we're beginning to build, we hope a multiplicity of projects come through these frameworks, and we'd certainly welcome these projects to apply for Culture Ireland funding, and we'd very much so love to see them make their way to the United States. We have time for just one more question. We pivot to my blind spot of the room. My apologies. Okay, two more from the left side.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hello.
Mark McCormick, Irish Community Services in London. It's one for Natalie there. So you mentioned in Minnesota you having this education program and 500 people a week taking classes. So I feel like I'm going to ask to copy your homework here a bit. But is it possible for us to get a copy of the syllabus and ideally actually the program you're teaching itself? So it's something that we could take back and maybe look at integrating into what we do as part of an education program that we could deliver as well.
I'd be very happy to speak with you or share any of our planning or programming. One of the things that you might find challenging, and I'm not sure quite how we do it, is that most of our learning is actually, I'd say, 50% youth and 50% adults. So why don't you check in with me a little bit later? And just on the Indigenous note, I wanted to point out we've actually done a few programs. Of course, the government has the Choctaw Scholarship, recognizing the Choctaw gift. There's the sculpture that's been made. We've been doing programs with Anahuaca as we're looking at Indigenous language and how that connects us to our places. One of the things that's really come out of the Ojibwe language exchange that we've had is how their language and how their arts and how their culture connects them back to the land, the seasons, the movement of the earth. It's so deep and it's so amazing. And I wonder with these Indigenous communities across the globe, they're very powerful, and I think they're here with the culture and the language and the arts and the dance to help us connect back. And maybe that's part of what's informing our programming as well. And yeah, we'll speak about that and talk about that big picture, but there's so much beautiful stuff going on. I could talk about it all day, but I know our time's up.
Thank you, Natalie. And our final question?
Hello, everyone. Maura Kelly here, Purple Mountain Media. I've been sitting here for a few minutes, and my questions changed about 3 times at this point, so now. But it's been fascinating, and I love this. I've worked at PBS for over 20 years, public broadcasting service, so we've done a lot of work with the arts, education, all different types of groups, collaboration, so everything you're saying just really hit me. I love the exchanges that you're doing with all of the different groups. It's so contemporary. And we know that art is a universal language and that it's also an economic driver. And definitely, the point is well taken, it's so valuable to the global Irish because it's really where a lot of people first get a hint of anything Irish history or culture. So the question for me is, and either one or whoever wants to answer it, and measuring impact is always very important, and you measure it on so many different levels. But say from an economic development point of view, how do you measure the impact that you're having? When you have an audience, you're listening to them, they're engaging. Do you see that the audience wanting to do more education of Irish heritage? They want to travel to Ireland. They want to create they want to work with Irish playwrights. How do you measure the impact to see that you're going deeper and you're really resonating with the audience?
That's a really interesting question and a complex one. I suppose, yeah, in terms of economic development, I suppose if we look at the growth and the trajectory of the artist's career, and it's gorgeous to see, even over the past year, artists touring within the Western US and coming back to bigger audiences. CMAT comes to mind, and so does Circa Richardson, to that respect, where they play solo shows to smaller crowds and come back within the year and play to a crowd twice the size. So to see that growth within their own trajectory is fascinating. And then also on the ground, even following on from transatlantic commissions, following Felicia's performance, there's been requests from plays or theaters in Los Angeles to read her script and to open those conversations. So often, it's not an immediately tangible outcome, but the ripples that flow from such a performance sort of feed back in longer time. Now, we have 2 cultural offerings for you today. You're in for 2 treats. There's a virtual reality exhibit in the foyer created by Irish National Opera. This is the first community VR piece, first community VR opera piece to be created. They've worked with communities between Tala and Inishmaan, and the piece itself is in Irish, and it's a stunning visual feat. I highly recommend checking it out in the breaks. We also have a surprise for the end of the panel. I'd like to invite Margaret McAuliffe to make her way to the stage, and for Jim to fill us in on the upcoming Humours Abandoned tour.
Yes, thanks so much, Síobhra. Making way for Margaret to perform. So, Fishamble has been producing the play The Humours Abandoned by Margaret McAuliffe for a number of years. It was a great success in Edinburgh. It's won the Irish Writers Guild Best Play Award. It's won awards in Dublin Fringe Festival, and it started off as part of the Show in a Bag initiative, which I mentioned earlier, that we've run for years with Irish Theatre Institute and Dublin Fringe Festival. And it's a play inspired by Margaret's own experience as a world champion Irish dancer. But Margaret's also a writer and performer, and we were really proud and honoured to develop this play with her and to be producing it around the world over the last few years. We have brought it to New York, and like many of our productions, they've been to New York, to LA, to Washington, D.C., but rarely kind of other parts of North America. And so through discussions with Culture Ireland and with Síobhra, we've been talking about presenting it kind of on a wider tour across the States. We first pitched it at the Consul General's kind of gathering in January 2019. It was meant to happen in 21. Obviously that didn't happen then. So 4 years later, here we finally are with the great patience and great support and energy of 14 partners, including William and Natalie here on the panel. We're bringing it to 14 theatres and venues and culture and heritage centres across North America over 7 weeks, starting off in a week and a half's time, I think. And Margaret's going to perform a very short excerpt here for us today, just to give a flavour of that. And we look forward so much to working with many of you here in the room and others when we tour it across those 14 venues in a few weeks' time.
So please join me in thanking our panellists today and welcoming Margaret McAuliffe to the stage. Thank you.
In school, I like maths. I like balancing equations and getting the right answer. I'm not so hot on English essays. I find it hard to make something up, because it can be anything, you know. The choice is too big. Like, I can't be sure that it's the best choice of subject, say, but X equals the right answer? Now that is so satisfying. That's why I like Irish dancing. There's a formula. This is how you start. Feet together, turn out your toes, heel to toe, and point your toe. See that angle in there? That's like a 90-degree angle, not an acute angle, or an obtuse angle, or a reflex angle, a right angle, the right angle. We learned that the GH in right used to be said out loud because it came from the C in Latin, rect. And now words with rect in them generally mean right. Well, I like to be right, to do things correctly, to rectify things if I get them wrong. Now, the hard bits, you have to practice. The rock. The scissors. The chop. The double chop. The drum. The drum heel toe. But you have to land heel to toe. Now, the tricky thing is, different judges go for different styles. Like, say, Stephen Kerwin has a lovely roly rally, and Rita Noonan flies through the air as she lifts. But they have to land heel to toe. That's the clincher, I thought. Well, that's what separates the nice dancers from the lovely dancers, they said. First place from third. Well, I was doing it all right, and I still didn't manage to come first. So it doesn't matter anymore. The winning, that is. I kept up the dancing. As Sumta Cleary, my teacher since I was like 7, maintains that I got bold when I turned 17. I got bold, all right. Boldly confident. More like myself. Annie O'Loughlin Hart, do you want an invitation to dance? Yeah, if you had one handy, that'd be great, yeah. The humour's abandoned. Let's go. 1, 2, hop back, shuffle over. 1, 2, step, stamp, step, stamp, step, heel, step. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, step, step, hop down, step, 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 hop. Rally, hopperly, hop back, stop, 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 stop. I'll stop you there, Annie. This is your dance. You are a very niche dancer, so you have to go out there and nail this one. Because after the reel, you'll be behind Rita, fly me to the moon, and you'll be barely in front of the likes of Stephen Kerwin. But see his set dance? Good night, Irene. Those legs are like a pair of battering rams. You don't have that power in yours, so the decider will be the humour's abandoned. Now, look it. I know it's boring and basic, and there are calls to get rid of it altogether because it's so simple. But I think it needs to stay because it's tradition. And you can't hide a foot fault when you're dancing playing. You have the best form in this competition. Now look it, I know you're out your age, but competitions are won and lost on the traditional. Now, hammer the floor for your set dance. Bonaparte's a treat. Let's go. Oh, we're out of time and already, Annie. Great start. Great start. Rat-a-tat-tat-tum, rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tum, dilly-dum, louder. Don't be afraid of that floor. Hammer it. Oh, we missed a chop back there, didn't we? Oh, lovely. Annie, listen, you're way ahead of that music. Oh, we're panicking now, I can see you. Annie, no one is going to stop you winning this but yourself. You know that. You're winning all year. But I know you. You're going to choke when you see the Rita Noonans and the Stephen Kerwins. Do you know what? They love it. They'll relish the opportunity to play mind games with you. They'll brag about winning this and that and go on like they don't know their steps. They'll be leaping around the side of the stage looking to fright. That's all for you. That's all to wig you out. Do you know the only difference between Rita Noonan and yourself? My dad isn't an Irish dancing teacher. Now, don't get smart. What do you think it is? She's just better. No, actually, she's never beaten you at your best. Until she does, she can't say she has beaten you. What else? She doesn't miss her chops. Jesus, Annie. Everyone misses sometimes. Christ, if I had a pound for the amount of times I miss a rally or a chop, that's what practice is for, and you're due to Daddy. What else? What else? I don't know. Something. I don't know. I know you don't. And I'll tell you, right? She walks out on that stage like a champion. Like she's already won it. And she is just getting up on that podium. All teeth. Face beaming. But that's all fake, right? I'm not asking you to do that. But see, as soon as she points that toe, That's her battle cry. She uses it as a spear. She draws her sword. Do you know what I mean? She's serious. You need to get serious. She makes it so the judge doubts themselves before they'll doubt her. She's saying, go on, take up your pen. I bleeding dare you not to give it to me. And they do, every time. So, you're basically saying I need to be more confident. Okay, cool. I want you to pretend like it doesn't matter to you so much that it's quietly in the bag. Do you remember how you were the day you won your first trophy? That's what I need from you. Not a care in the world. You were the one to beat that day. You knew it. You knew it. And you made the whole hall know it too, all right? Now look at me. No, not the floor. There's nothing down there. Look at me. The only person you're up against next weekend is Annie O'Loughlin Hart. Now, Bonaparte's from the set. Let's go.
Thank you all. Time for a coffee. Thank you so much.